Coogs House, the Houston Cougars get back on track in a big way with a home win over Texas Tech, but they got one performance we absolutely have to talk about.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who can't stop by, please be sure to hit subscribe down below. That way we can listen to Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. Appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. If you're on YouTube, welcome back to the YouTube channel. It's so good to see you again. Remember to subscribe because we're doing a giveaway every 250 subscribers. We're approaching that 2,000 mark, and that's the next one of those benchmarks. So hit subscribe, help us get there. Like and comment on the video to let us know you are in the contest. If you don't know what to say, you just are so flabbergasted about Jamal Shead's performance, just don't know what to say about Texas Tech's lack there of offense. You're a football guy, and this is a basketball-heavy episode. I don't know. You don't know what to say. Tell us in the comments down below. How old is the oldest living person you know? It's a question of the day in my class these days. All right, so today we're talking some, obviously, in recap, the game that was. Houston does knock off Texas Tech in a big kind of way, 77-54, to get back in the win column after two straight conference losses. Houston's now 2-2 in the Big 12. Texas Tech came into Houston, I should point out, 3-0 in the Big 12, leading the Big 12 conference. Only undefeated team in the Big 12 conference coming into this game in Houston. We're going to break it all down. First, we're going to talk about Jamal Shead and what he did at Texas Tech and kind of what they needed and how that all worked together. Second, I want to talk some of the second segment about what else went right for Houston. Houston did a number of other things right besides just have Jamal Shead on their roster. And then last, but certainly not least, as we're in this Big 12 conference and Houston's looking to lay claim to it the best they can, we got to look around the conference, see what else is going on, because the Big 12 is a gauntlet and a marathon and a wood chipper and all of those things that sound awful all put together at once. So got to make sure we spend the third segment looking some around the conference. But you could argue in our first segment that Houston won this game on May 27th, 2019, because that was the day that Jamal Shead committed to the University of Houston as a three-star prospect out of Maynard, Texas. Now, Jamal has done a lot of things in his time at Houston. He's been a great face of Houston Cougar basketball. And frankly, Jamal Shead was called as much by Kelvin Sampson in the postgame. He called him the face of the program. He called him the leader of the culture, for what's worth. He also called Juwan Roberts the warrior of the culture. That was an interesting distinction. But Jamal Shead did the thing on Wednesday. And by the thing, I mean when basketball people, coaches, players watch games, sometimes you see the way a guy approaches a game from the opening take. From like, oh, that guy is here for W's. And I'm not saying that it necessarily even always works out like that, but every great team in college, the professional level, the high school level, frankly, even at the rec, every great team has a guy that when the going gets tough says, listen, get on my back. We're not losing this game. And on Wednesday night, that guy was one Jamal Shead. Jamal had 29 points, a career high for Jamal, just 2 of 9 from three. And I said that not to be dismissive or pejorative, but to point out most of his points were attacking the basket, getting downhill. Simply put, Texas Tech had no one that could stay in front of Jamal, and they had no coverage that could do where they could rotate over fast enough to cut off where he was going. He kept them guessing and on their toes. He really did dice up a talented Texas Tech defense, an undefeated in Big 12 play, Texas Tech defense, on the way to the basket. When they slid over, Jamal had 10 assists. He dropped the ball off to bigs. Javier Francis, the benefit of a lot of those. Juwan Roberts benefited as well. Big-time dunks. He hit a couple kick-out threes. Jamal Shead, between his own scoring and his assist, accounted for, if my math here is correct, 22 total field goals. He made 12. He had 10 assists. 22 total field goals made because of Jamal Shead for Houston. Texas Tech as a team had 18. Now, I'm not great at math. I know some of them are worth 3 and some of them are worth 2, and Texas Tech certainly shot a lot more free throws than Houston or whatever. But generally speaking, if one guy in Houston accounts for more field goals than the entirety of the other team, he won the game for us. Now, Jamal does a lot of things very, very well. And we're talking about how great his offensive game was. It's super easy and convenient to talk about that because honestly, he had his career high. Of course, we're going to talk about the guy, leader of the program, face the franchise, face the program, culture setter, all those, big time labels for a guy when he has his career high. We're talking about the offside of the floor and how they really kind of just ran simple pick and rolls and backside drop options. JVR Francis did a great job. What we called in my programs tee ups, where he hits the lane and comes back down the line of the tee and drops it off there for him as the defense is cutting him off baseline or whatever. Relocation type actions, kick out threes from guys that were rising and lowering at the right angles. All that's great. Basketball X's and O's. If you want to get nerdy, let's get nerdy. But we can't go too far down talking about Jamal and his offensive game without talking about what really probably sealed the game, and that was his defense. Now, Pop Isaac is a guy averaging nearly 20 points per game for Texas Tech. He's their leading scorer in every sense of the word, and he's a guard, and he's not a 6'7", 6'5" type guard. He's a 6'2" guard, and that meant that he was going to be Jamal Shead's matchup. And frankly, Jamal came out and shut him down. Isaac went 4-15 from 3. 3 of 10 from behind the arc, had just 12 points, which is noticeably less than the over 18 he's averaging per game. He held a guy that was averaging nearly 40% field goal percentage to less than 26. Really, really tremendous defensive effort, flustering him. There are moments in the game where Pop Isaac looked tired of being bombarded by every single direction he went. Every time he tried to change directions, Jamal Shead was in front of him, cutting off lanes, cutting off penetrations, beating him to a spot, making him turn. And Isaac's I'm not saying a kid quit because that doesn't seem right, but Isaac's body language looked defeated early on in this contest. And that is to say that that's credit to Jamal too. Jamal Shead's leading the team on both sides of the floor. And interesting to me is it sounds like in the post-game commentary, it sounds like before the game, Kelvin Sampson had a moment where he pulled Jamal aside and just told him that he loved him and he appreciated the stuff he'd done for the program. And frankly, we talked on over the weekend about how when Jamal didn't get the ball back at the TCU game, and Coach was talking about that after the fact, he almost got a little emotional about how do we not get the ball back to Jamal and that chance to help us win the game. Clearly, that bond is real. But also, that's the psychoanalytical stuff that Kelvin does that is just unheard of level genius, because he didn't know at that point necessarily that Jamal was going to have a career high that night, but he knew that Jamal was going to be important, and he wanted to make sure that Jamal was not, frankly, in a bad mood, in a bad place, or not in any way deterred by what happened over the weekend and ready to go. And he made sure that Jamal felt appreciated. And in return, Jamal Shead dismantled the Texas Tech Red Raiders, an undefeated in conference Texas Tech Red Raiders, a 14-2 coming in Texas Tech Red Raiders, a nationally ranked top 25 team, Texas Tech Red Raiders. Jamal Shead took them to, sorry for the pun, the woodshed. He did it. Now, I say all of that to say that Jamal Shead, you could argue, won this basketball game. We talked about him for a full segment. He's the MVP of the game in every way I can think of. He got LJ Cryer involved early. He was intentional about who he found with the ball. I go on and on. If you can't tell, I like talking about Jamal Shead. But I also am in things that worked well for Houston in other parts, and I want to talk about that in the second segment. And if we're talking about the way this team worked like a well-oiled machine, we can't go too much farther without talking about your well-oiled machine. And if you have passion, drive, and patience, what bring home the win trophy is also what's going to keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers and roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your car is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because the eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusive by eBay, guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. Now, Houston, I mentioned, won this game in May of 2019 when they added Jamal Shead to their roster. And it's the start of the new year. And if you're a small business trying to find ways to add important players like that to your roster, you make sure that you make the move and go to LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success depends on the team you surround yourself with. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs has created all the tools you need to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, makes it the best place to hire. Post job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, so I mentioned that, well, Jamal Shead went exceedingly right, and that you could argue that Jamal Shead won this basketball game. I think we can make a fairly convincing argument that Jamal Shead being on the Houston Cougar roster won this basketball game. Jamal's not the only thing that went right in this one. He's a big thing that went right in this one. And he had 29 points on his own. He accounted for more field goals than Texas Tech did. But Houston actually had other stuff go right as well. Houston turned Texas Tech over 14 times. Texas Tech was averaging single-digit turnovers per game on the season. And Houston able to flip that script and make them turn the ball over. Texas Tech's a very guard-led team. Pops Isaac and Toussaint were both key players for them in each of their contests in the Big 12 so far. He was able to turn those guys over. Toussaint had 4 turnovers to his name alone. Isaac did as well. Now, I also should point out that I thought one of my keys to the game when I was looking at things before the game was that Texas Tech had a lot of size and Houston had to find a way to manage that size. How is managing that size, or how good a job do you think it is to manage size, I should say, when they only allowed 8 points in the paint to Texas Tech? That's a lot of, frankly, great defense in and around the basket. But then when you flip that and look at Houston having 40 points in the paint, the discrepancy there is 32. Houston had 40 points in the paint. Texas Tech had just 8. And the size advantage was going to Tech. Now, that's in large part because Houston had those turnovers, got out in the fast break, pushed the ball up the floor. But Houston had just 17 points off of those turnovers. And frankly, in attacking the basket, you could argue they were more successful in doing that in half-court settings, right? Because some of those fast break points are coming off kick-out threes in the break. Now, all of that is to say that they did a great job of identifying where things were happening within the Tech offense. I'm not saying listen to my scouting report or anything like that, but they clearly had a good understanding of what Texas Tech was trying to do and was able to disrupt them and keep them from doing it and keep the ball out of the lane. They really only came in, Texas Tech, that is, with one high percentage three-point shooter, Toussaint, and then Pops Isaac shoots a high volume and shoots a decent percentage. And Texas Tech had a guy that does not shoot at a legacy level type percentage do very well in this game. Went 6-9. Walton for them went 6-9 from behind the arc and got open for some threes late. The game was already decided at that point, but also he didn't come in necessarily being like the threat that Houston needed to find a way to stop. Houston found ways to keep Toussaint at just one of 2 from behind the arc. And they found a way to keep up Isaac to 3 of 10, forcing difficult shots and shots attempts. Keeping Isaac to 12 points, well, I want to give a lot of credit to Jamal for making him frustrated and flustered, is a team effort. You saw this when he went in the lane. He had Francis all over him. You saw this when he went, Shead is riding him into Jawan Roberts at different points at that 4 or 8 foot mark. Found ways to just swarm the ball in the corners. Houston did an interesting job in this game of trapping the ball and where they decided to trap the ball. Obviously, Houston will always trap the post, but in this game, it felt like whenever Texas Tech drove the ball to what was like a post-like area, like inside of 6 feet on either side of the rim around the block, Houston was trapping at the blocks, regardless of what position or how the ball got there. And it was interesting to see that happen because Texas Tech was clearly not ready for that level of ball pressure once the ball got in that deep. There have been all kinds of bad decisions, and frankly, had to spit it back out and start offense over. And while Houston did force 14 turnovers, they had another number, I don't even know what the number would be, of possessions where Texas Tech had bad shots late in the shot clock to avoid a turnover that kind of functionally worked the same because Houston did such a good job of forcing them to take difficult shots that they didn't want to take. They trapped the ball in the corners. They also, it looked like, were trapping along the sidelines in both slot areas, slots being the outside, like free throw line extended. If you push that on out to the sideline, they were trapping in both those areas as well, which kind of makes it difficult passes to most scoring zones on the floor. It was interesting to see how Houston's team defense reacted in that sense. Texas Tech is a talented basketball team. Texas Tech is scoring a lot of points this year. Texas Tech was held to 54. That's a big deal, folks. That's a big deal. Now, as far as individual performances go, I think it was good to see LJ Cryer put the ball through the hoop early. He finished with just 8 points, but that was because at some point it became the Jamal Shead show while he was in the game. And they were finding him, feeding the hot hand. I was intrigued, and I really, really liked the development of Damian Dunn doing a bunch of non-scoring things. Damian Dunn played 28 minutes. That's the most minutes of anyone off the bench by like leaps and bounds. He had 28. The next highest was Tugler at 13. So Damian got a lot of minutes in this game as the sixth man, although he was not the first sub, but he sixth man, right? And Dunn did a great job in his time in a bunch of dirty work plays that don't go in the scores book. And I've liked Damian in Houston. That wasn't the read on him coming in. Dunn is a great isolation scorer. I've touted the things he does from the mid-post area with his back to the basket and how he scores inside of 18 feet, instead of 10 feet, instead of 15 feet with his body. He's really strong, kind of got like an old man's game, kind of wiser than most kind of guy in a lot of ways. Very mature basketball player, very mature person, very mature game. In this game, that wasn't the read on Damian Dunn. Dunn did a great job of dirty work type of plays. He was involved in offensive rebounds. Frankly, there's one play that comes to mind where he actually doesn't get credit for the offensive rebound, but he crashes the offensive glass in such a way that causes a little bit of a body pileup. The guys are diving for the ball or whatever, and the chaos leads to Texas Tech's player, I don't remember which one it was at this point, grabbing for the ball while half laying out of bounds. Well, he touched the ball. It's Houston's ball because the guy's laying out of bounds. Dunn gets no statistic for that. There's no body keeping track of Dunn retaining possession because of his effort there. But his effort led to Texas Tech being technically called for an out of bounds, which technically gets Houston the ball back. And it's not an offensive rebound or anything like that for Dunn, but it is a hustle play that I'm sure Sampson and company give him an attaboy for in film. And it's the kind of thing that you see Dunn, a great player in his own right coming into Houston, adapting to the Houston culture. If Dunn can be Houston culture times Damian Dunn, meaning he does those cultural things as well as does his thing with the scoring of the basketball, that guy might be a pro. Now, he doesn't have a whole lot of time left in his career to do it. I don't mean to say, like, get your hopes up about him getting drafted in the lottery. If he has that kind of mark, that'd be great, right? But the melding of those two things are two very different players. And if he can really find that sweet spot in the middle where he's getting a couple steals a game, the occasional block, some diving on the floor, dirty work type plays, if he can do all of those things and give you 8 to 15 points in that mid-post area, that guy becomes really dangerous all of a sudden. And frankly, with the absence of Terrence Arsenault, who I really miss a lot, Terrence, I miss you. Get healthy. Get well soon. With Terrence Arsenault being hurt, Damian doing those things becomes all the more important because as polished a player as Damian is on offense, Terrence was that instinctive a player on defense. He was in the right place at the right time. Often his length, his athleticism, his hustle, he made up for any mistake he made by getting the ball back for Houston. And having that yin and yang offense defense at that spot, that 3-4 kind of big guard, smaller forward kind of guy was going to be awesome. And now without Terrence, We've been kind of missing some of that. We've been trying to find some in Ramon. We're trying to find some in JoJo. If Damian can do that, that really, really, really helps Houston. But that's helping the Houston Cougar basketball team. If you're trying to help and you are paying attention to the Houston pro football team, I'm going to tell you to make sure that you find that help at FanDuel, America's #1 sports. Because right now at FanDuel, even though the NFL season's all wrapped up, they still have all kinds of great deals going on, including a new customer $150 bonus bet back for putting down a $5 bet. It's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, if you put down $5 as a new customer. They won't listen to Locked On Coogs. They still have the Houston Texans as a 9.5-point dog this weekend. I'm telling you, that's bogus. I am telling you that you can go beat that line, root for Houston along the way at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Houston wins, gets to 2-2 in the Big 12. Big 12 is the best conference of basketball. It's like not close. And frankly, the gauntlet looks gauntlettier than normal right now. Now, the Big 12 men's basketball split is the kind of thing where last year we talked about how last year you could have lost 5 games and you'd have won the conference, right? So Houston sits at 2-2. They got another tough one this weekend with Central Florida. And that actually ties us kind of where I want to start this segment. I want to look around the Big 12 and kind of see what else is lurking out there for the Cougs. And starting with Central Florida has had a really good basketball season this year. They beat Kansas for Kansas's first conference loss last weekend. They were competitive with BYU, who's in the top 20. And then on Wednesday, they beat UT Austin 77-71 in Austin, Texas. Now, I think what's interesting about that one is actually nothing that happened in the game. Although we'll watch and break it down. We need to preview Central Florida, right? Because it's an important game, I'm sure. I would point out Texas is actually not ranked right now, and things are going on like that in Austin. But after the game, the fascinating thing on the internet for me, the thing that I laughed at on the internet, was someone caught in the post-game handshake line. Rodney Terry, coach of UT Austin, going through and cussing at players and saying that's, bogus, but didn't say bogus, and that's classless and this and that about what UCF players are doing. And come to find out, they were just doing a horns down to the student section. That's it. Horns down. Innocent, simple hand gesture. The kind of thing that people do all the time for all kinds of different hand gestures. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's someone doing some sort of anti-Houston Cougar Paw right now, listening to me talk about it. It's bogus to be upset about that. You're upset you lost 77-71 at home. Home games are hard to get over if you lose them in this conference. And so I say, we all give them a dose of it when it's time, because that's ridiculous. But Central Florida knocks off Texas in a way that's so frustrating. Their coaches cussing at players in the post-game handshake line. Not the only result, I guess not one of the only results. On Wednesday night, West Virginia went in to Norman and lost 77-63. West Virginia also beat Texas over the weekend. Oklahoma, though, is top 15 right now, looking better by the day. I thought the game at the end of the regular season for Houston might be kind of a get-right game getting into conference tournament play. It clearly is going to be more difficult than that. It's going to be an interesting game to see Houston and Kelvin Sampson and Quantis White and Hollis Price and Kellen Sampson and all these guys with Sooner blood in their system from decades ago at this point go into Norman for that contest, especially if Oklahoma holds on as they keep on going. Jalen Moore is an interesting guy to watch play for them. He's 6'6", 6'7". He's athletic. He's long. He had a big game for them on Wednesday night. So it'll be interesting to see how Houston matches up with them later in the season. Right now, again, Oklahoma is in the top 15 and continues to win. West Virginia, you hope they could come back more after their big win over Texas last weekend. They fall. Other Big 12 games I should point out from Tuesday night. because not every team plays every night, right? It's not football. It's not a weekly by weekly thing. Kansas knocked off Oklahoma State in a big way in Stillwater, 90-66. I'd imagine Houston also puts up a lot of points on Oklahoma State. I don't know if they put up 90, but I know they probably also don't give up 66. We'll see how that one goes when they play later. Baylor and Kansas State went to overtime. Kansas State did hold on to win that game. Coach Jerome Tang is leading a great program. Houston's a week later this year. They have to play Kansas State, Texas, and Kansas in a single week. That's going to be challenging, and Jerome Tang and company will be a big, big part of that. Their point guard, different point guards than last year, but another shorter guy named Tyler Perry, different Tyler Perry. He is leading the way for them. He's averaging 15 points a game. He had a game high of 18 in that game against Baylor last night. Baylor, as a top 10 team, does fall in overtime. It was in Kansas State, though, in the Little Apple. So, hard to win the road, as we continue to see and hear. Cincinnati knocked off TCU in Cincinnati. Speaking of hard to win on the road, TCU had made in the top 25 after beating Houston last week, only to go into Cincinnati and lose on the road. I will say, we saw how close Houston was to playing TCU after playing a pretty poor first half. Almost won that basketball game anyway. TCU is a really good basketball team. It's their first conference loss by more than a couple points. I guess they lost to Kansas by 2 points on there as well. So actually 2-2, both 2-2. Anyway, I'm impressed by TCU, I should say, and I keep forgetting that because of a bogus call they lost to Kansas. Fun game, though, if you want to go back and watch that one on your DVRs, whatever. Cincinnati does win that one in overtime. And then BYU beat Iowa State fairly handily in Provo. Now, Iowa State is also in the top 25, but BYU is in the top 20. Both teams very, very good starts to the year. I think the biggest thing there was the home court advantage, and Utah's going to be very, very hard to beat this season. Very talented team on top of that, obviously, but the altitude is no joke. Texas Tech, even after the loss, has a split of the top of the conference. They're 3-1 along with Kansas State, Kansas, and Baylor. So, again, Houston at 2-2 is not horribly far behind. Everyone's got a loss, and everyone will have a lot more. But just as far as like the kind of team they've played, they just beat Texas Tech by a fairly sizable margin, and Texas Tech sits atop the table here at 3-1 in the conference, 14-3 on the season. Obviously, Kansas being at 15-2 and 3-1 feels like they'll be up there for the majority of the season. I don't know how long Tech will be up at the top, but seems important to keep paying attention to the top of the table here as Houston looks to get another Big 12 win this weekend. Now, Houston, as a team new to the conference, is finding their footing still. They beat Texas Tech tonight. I said last night, I guess, as you're listening to this, 77-54. Central Florida this weekend at 1 o'clock on Saturday will be an important contest. It's another home game. These are only back-to-back home games as I see it across the rest of their schedule. So pulling up a couple back-to-back wins, get back over 500 in the conference play will be important before going to Provo for that uphill battle. No pun intended on the altitude there next week. So make sure you hit subscribe to Locked On Coogs. That way we can tell you all about it all the time, every day. Locked On Coogs, proud Locked On Podcast Network. If you want to find me personally and talk about Houston sports as well, you can find me at Painsworth, 512, P-A-I-N-S, W-O-R-T-H, 512 on every social media platform, Twitter/X, Musk, whatever you want to call it, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Snapchat, whatever. I'm always Painsworth 512. So find me wherever you can talk about Houston sports. Locked On Coogs is a private Locked On podcast, and that means your team, our Coogs, every day. Go Coogs.